Today, I appeal to the international community. First of all, I would like to thank our partners for their support. The whole of Europe understands that they are sending aid to Ukraine because hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians today, at the cost of their lives, the lives of their relatives and even children, are deterring the aggressor from invading other countries. At the same time, NATO allies refuses to close the sky over the Ukraine. The arguments about murders, targeted bombing and rocket attacks on residential buildings, hospitals, maternity hospitals and kindergartens, and the destruction of one of the European nations are not sufficient in 21st century in Europe. Fine. Then all of those who are now blocking the closure of the sky over Ukraine should recall April 1986, the Saturday night, April 26. Do you recall? That was the night when the disaster happened. The disaster that is considered to be the most massive in the history of the nuclear energy, both in terms of the number of people killed and affected by its consequences, and in terms of economic damage. The radioactive cloud from the Chernobyl accident passed over the European part of the existing USSR, the largest part of Europe, and the eastern part of USA. Today we are talking about Zaporizhia NPP, the largest one in Europe. The consequences of the Chernobyl accident with only one power unit was and were catastrophic for the world. And now imagine what will happen if another Russian missile hits the Zaporizhia NPP, which has 6 power units. Currently, the site of Zaporizhia NPP as well as the Chernobyl NPP are under the control of Russian armed forces. Targeting Energodar with its Zaporizhia NPP wasn't an accident. These are purposeful actions. Russia has committed an act of nuclear terrorism. We were miraculously lucky as the fire was liquidated, but tomorrow may not be so lucky. If the Zaporizhia NPP explosion occurs, the consequences will be devastating, not only for Ukraine, but for the whole world, as a nuclear disaster of this scale will surpass all previous accidents at nuclear power plants, including Chernobyl and the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. So now there is a question. Is the world ready for a catastrophic 6 times as massive as Chernobyl? Are all those who hesitate now whether it's necessary to close the sky over Ukraine ready to sacrifice the lives and health not only of Ukrainians but also of their children? This is not about a war somewhere far away in Ukraine. It's about your safety and about the nuclear danger to the whole world. So consider the situation. Ask yourself a question. Are you ready to just hope that the rocket will not hit the nuclear power plants, as they do not accidentally hit, to homes and kindergartens? Preventive sanctions were not imposed. Everyone is now watching from a distance the consequences of this hesitation on TV. You cannot observe a nuclear catastrophe from afar. It's not going to work out the way. Your arguments that the current refusal to implement A2AD is related to the fact that NATO is trying to avoid the nuclear war is not convincing, since Russia has already started it. Historical lessons are served and they must be taken into account. Listen to your people. Yesterday, Reuters Ipsos poll made it clear that the outrage over Russia's invasion of Ukraine is growing. About 74% of Americans including the vast majority of Republicans and Democrats, say the United States and its North Atlantic Treaty Organization's allies should introduce a non-fly zone in Ukraine, the poll said. If Eisenhower had supported Europe before the World War II, the United States would have never had Pearl Harbor. If the countries of the world imposes the same sanctions against Russia as today, a full-scale war will not have begun. Say the least of it, the only way of all of us to survive, and I mean the whole world, is the A2AD zone.